Alright guys, so where we left off with in class, we started using a new program called Inkscape. Now what Inkscape is basically a freeware version that you can download totally for free on your computers of another program called Adobe Illustrator. This program is used primarily to create, think logotures or quick advertisement layouts, but the reason that it's used for such is because it's what's known as a vector software. The idea behind vector software is the fact that unlike in GIMP where it's a rasterized image, whenever I start to create something, say like a basic shape like that, what I can do with this object is the fact that it's not actually little tiny pixels. Whereas in GIMP we were kind of messing around, pushing around all these pixels. Instead, with a vector image, is what it does is it coordinates one teeny little dot along the way. And then it tells the computer at a certain degree or angle to connect those two dots. So all it's really remembering are little tiny dots, not the actual picture itself, which means that let's say this was my logo, it's horrible, but it could be. I can zoom into it as much as I want and it's never gonna get pixelated, ever. So I can take my magnifying glass, go ahead and zoom on backy outy. Okay. Sure, looking pretty good. Obviously I've got my little zoomer down here as well if I needed to jump to a certain size. I've got some basic shapes over here, basic tools. I've got my arrow that just moves it around. Notice that whenever I click on a shape I get these little arrows over here. I can use those to squashy and stretchy and make it all look nice. Oops, make it look nice and pretty as I go along. Okay, so those little arrows. If I wanted to rotate it or skew it just slightly, I can click again on it and you'll see those little arrows will change. The corners now, rotation, and the little edges here will allow me to skew my shape in a different direction. So I can get a pretty cool diamond relatively quickly. Alright, so we've got the basic idea down, everything looks pretty good. If I hold down shift while I'm skewing it, it will move it from the center. So see here, without shift I'm kind of pulling it in a direction. With shift, notice that there's a little crosshair in the center there because it's centering the object for me. Okay. Something else I can do, if I want to, I can hold down Control while I do it, and it'll keep it pretty much in perspective. Now I can still kind of notch it out if I want to, but it'll do the job. Cool? Alright. Now, a couple other tools. Magnifying glass, obviously you already know. Square tool makes squares, I know, rocket science. Circle tool makes, get this, circles. Who knew? I also have this little 3D box here. Honestly, we're not going to use it a whole lot, but it makes, well, kind of 3D shapes, kind of. Then I've got some other fun tools. A Polygon star tool, so I can make a cool polygon like a pentagram, or I can change it right up top here and make a cool little star. Okay. A couple other tools here. A little spiral. Again, you're never going to use it, but there it is. And finally, we get into the bread and butter, which is the pencil tool, which allows me to free draw. Right. And the pen tool, which the pen tool, the best way to think about it is kind of like in GIMP where we used the select tool. You can kind of click and drag with it. Same thing, I'm going to click and make little tiny points along the way. And then I can connect it back and it makes a shape. Okay. Now, if I make a shape, say with like the pen tool here, I can always go through then and play with these colors down at the bottom and fill in that color, just like so. And if at any point in time you want to see the stroke or the fill, if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see one says fill, that's the color inside, and one says stroke, that's the outline color. If you need to see those, you just double-click and, whoops, sorry about that. Whenever you double-click on the stroke menu, there we go, it will pop up with this fill and stroke menu here. And again, you can see I can change the actual fill color to whatever the heck I want it to be. And I can also change my stroke as well to whatever I want it to be. If I want that stroke to be a little bit thicker, or if I need that stroke to change anyway, I can go over here and change the style of my stroke. And again, changing the width of the stroke makes that outline even bigger. I can change how it bends. If I want softer curves to it, little angled curves, and you can see it changes right here each time. Okay? If I don't want a stroke at all, I don't want an outline, because you don't want a stroke, you got to exercise. What I can do is just hit this little tiny X, and the stroke is gone. I can do the same thing for the fill if I want it to be completely transparent but still kind of there. And finally, if I want to change the opacity, I want it to be kind of a slightly glossed over lime green color. I just drop that opacity down and it gives me this kind of transparent look. Okay, so again, a lot of this stuff should feel very comfortable from using it over in GIMP. The only difference being is the fact that it's kind of in a different place now. Also, remember to save often because, unfortunately, Inkscape does have a tendency to crash often. And we're going to be making a lot of different shapes along the way. Okay, so there's all that for you. Now, a couple other techniques for you. Grab that pen tool real quick. So just like before, I can grab and I can click and I can click. And you notice whenever I click, if I don't release it right away and I bend my mouse, I'll start to get this curvature. So what I'm doing is literally, this is a vector. If you've had vectors in like math class, it's the same idea. It's kind of a trajectory. And I'm telling the computer from point A over to, point B, how much of a degree of a curve is happening. So I can go through and kind of bend this around and release, and there it is. Now notice my pen automatically wants to keep that curve kind of going along its path. You can tell that because there's that little blue line, and that blue line is basically saying from point A, that's the beginning point where we just clicked at, all the way up to the end of that blue line, and then back down again, so I kind of get like this little triangle effect. It's trying to give me this nice, smooth curve. Once I do that, back into straights. Now what happens if I want to do like a shark's tooth? I want to have like a point right at the end there. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give myself a curve, just like before. Only this time, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and you're going to see it bends that blue line. So now all of a sudden what I'm doing is I'm telling the computer to go, instead of this direction, to go in this direction. Again, giving me a nice point. Now how far down I want to go is obviously going to change. I don't need it to be this far. What I do need it to be is a little bit shorter. So I'm going to shorten it up a little bit, right about there. Release. Okay, so I've got my curve. Come back to where I want that tooth to come to, so about here. Maybe I want it to hook in a little more, so I'll just pull that in, like so. If I need to, I can again hold down Shift, get a nice straight line. And there's my kind of shark's fin or hook gonna get you, okay? And again, I can color it up, nice and pretty, good to go. All right, so the shape looks pretty funky, but the idea is the fact that if you remember doing stencils back in Art 1, the idea of kind of layering one color on top of another color on top of another color on top of another color slowly gives you a shape. So for example, I'm just going to freehand this very quickly and very poorly, but the idea being is that I could start with kind of a basic shape, something like that, and let's say I'm going to shade it light gray, right? Then I can go through and start making other shapes. And we'll make that shape darker gray. We'll make another. And just by making these little shapes. A good way to think about it is almost like if you ever cut out paper, construction paper, and kind of stacked it on top, you can start to make pretty cool looking images, pretty cool looking pictures relatively easily, going along and developing up what you need to. So to kind of finish this all up here real quick, you end up stacking these pictures and slowly but surely getting this kind of face shape. Now this one's pretty poor, and I was also using the pencil tool, so we don't want to do that. But the same basic idea. The last step is we want to introduce our layers. We know how much layers are important in GIMP. So if you click on the layers down here, there's a little button, or you can just do the keyboard command Shift Control L, and that'll pull up, I'll pull up your layers menu. Here we go. Same thing as before. Eyeball makes it go disappear-y. Lock makes it lock down. So if I make a shape and I lock it, I can't affect that shape at all now. Right? Make it disappear with the eyeball. What you want to do is slowly maybe make another layer on top. Then I can start to add in different shapes. And slowly I'll start stacking these different shapes over and over and over again until eventually I get a cool looking picture. So what you're going to want to do as you're going along, maybe for a first little test, is to go through, import just a basic picture, maybe even make it black and white to kind of start with, and start thinking about what is the lightest color that I have and kind of do a whole silhouette. Then say what's the next lightest color, a little bit darker, and start outlining anything that's that way. Again, multiple shapes, all the same color. Then go through, and again, and again, and again. You've got all these grayscales down here. Or if you wanted to, if you want to directly pull the color that you're looking for, you can just grab it very, very simply, because you can actually go through and grab the dropper tool, which will allow you to grab that color, just like in GIMP, that little eyedropper, whoop, tool will allow you to grab up that color. But that's a very, very brief overview. Remember to talk to me in class if you run into any problems along the way, and I'll make sure to do a quicker and maybe better tutorial in a little bit. See you soon.